All right, Shaun, welcome to Athlete Evolve. You are the first guest, and I really want to thank you for being here and just kind of, injecting us with your knowledge and experience as a baseball player, but also a coach.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Being the first is always exciting. It's only one way to go, and that's up. So I'm glad to be the first one to kick this thing off for you and hopefully kickstart it on the right foot here. So thanks for having us, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Of course. So why don't you start us off with just a path to your current position, coming from a player to where you are now?
Yeah, and it's extensive. If I get too deep into it, I'll age myself here. But I mean, basically, played all through as a little kid, through high school, through college. Got drafted by the Indians in 2000 to played for about 6 or 7 seasons. Then bounced over to being a player coach. So I started my coaching career at the professional level in AA. Did that for a couple years, and by the end of that contract, there wasn't a full-time spot, and that's when I kind of had to soul search a little bit, try to join the real world. Took a sales job with a former teammate of mine's dad. Did that for 2 months, man, and it wasn't for me. Selling stuff and cold calling. Again, I'll read a lot, and at that particular time especially, I remember being at a coffee shop reading a book that his dad actually gave me to help me with the sales part. It actually inspired me to do something else. That got me back into the mental skill stuff that I've always been interested in. Went back home to California and got into Ken Revise's program, and kind of went that route. And in the meantime, as I was trying to pay for school, going back to a master's degree, helped out at high school. A friend of mine was the head coach, just got the job. He's like, hey, why don't you come help me out? And I told him no probably 100 times before finally saying, fine, I'll do it. Did that for a season, and then it happened fast. Another friend of mine got a head coaching job at a major Division I school in the Big West, and he asked me to join him there. So I did. I did that for about 2.5 years at the Division I college level. Put the master's stuff on the back burner and did the college coaching gig, and did that grind, and a lot of really cool things. And there's also some downsides to the college coaching. And I just hunted down getting back to professional baseball again. That's where my passions lied, with that lifestyle, that level of play and everything that goes into it. And was fortunate enough to get hired back by the Indians as a hitting coach at a rookie ball level. Was a hitting coach, the rookie ball hitting coach the full season. In that third year back, earned a position as a manager. So I managed the year, and then at the end of that year, I got off the plane coming back home to see my wife, and I had a voicemail from the farm director telling me that I had the Dodgers had asked for permission to contact me to be a coordinator, and went through that process and basically became a coordinator of skill development for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And then from there, over the past 5 years now, I'm now the assistant field coordinator for the Dodgers. And that's what I do day to day, oversee a lot of different areas with staff development and all the player development from AAA all the way down to Dominican Republic. And basically just how we develop our players to get into the major leagues and maximize their skill sets and abilities in every area possible, from the physical, fundamental, and mental, all the way down. And that's what my day-to-day looks like at this point in my career. But yeah, the scope is big, covered a lot of different age groups, levels, abilities, skills, and along the way, got a master's degree. I ended up getting it through the process in performance psychology. My wife is a board-certified behavior specialist, so we've been able to combine those two things. Started a side company called Adapt, which looks into, again, the mental skills, team building, parent train on behavior. So all-encompassing road to this point. It's been a lot of fun, been really exciting. Learned a lot, of course, made some mistakes and had my own personal beliefs questioned at times. But I tell you what, it's been a really fun ride to work for some amazing organizations, met some really great people, and of course, why we do it, the players. I can't say enough about them. So that's it, man. It's been a long road, it seems like, but here we are doing cool things. So that's what we're doing.
Let's talk about some of the stuff that you said early on. Number one, what was that sales book that kind of positioned you out of that 2-month trial job?
Yeah, man, it was actually wasn't even a sales book. I think it was oh my goodness, what was the name of it now? I've had so many of my got to be believed to be heard, I believe it was. But it really just got into like purpose and what are you doing and why you're doing it. And, you know, the point was like to drive you to be a better salesperson and just find your lot and, you know, find your niche and find your lane and crush it. But it really just made me question in a different way. Why are you even doing what you're doing? You know, at that same time, I kind of parlayed that book with, I think it was Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning, and really opened my eyes about purpose and why and what are you even doing? You know, and I found myself asking, you know, like, what am I chasing? I was chasing money. You know, at the end of the day, I was trying to make sales, to make money, to chase the pie in the sky and have this elaborate life that you try to draw up financially. And it just wasn't there, man. It just wasn't resonating for me. It was doing it for the wrong reasons. I remember walking into Mike's office and be like, "Hey, thanks for the book, but it actually inspired me to do something else. Here's my 2-week notice on top of it." And he was pumped. You know, he was really pumped. Just to know that I was going to do what I really wanted to do, and that's what that company was about anyway. So, yeah, it was interesting. I got my truck and drove across the country from Louisiana back to California, and no real plan other than just chasing what I believed in more. So, yeah.
So after that, you were offered a job, told to kind of come work with a friend of yours, and you said no. Why were you saying no at that point?
You know, it was the high school level, right? It was a high school position. It was in Newport Beach. It was about a half-hour drive or so from where I was living in Orange County. And I just wasn't ready to get back into coaching. I just wasn't ready to, especially high school. I just wasn't ready to give everything I had back into it quite yet at that particular time. I was, again, more focused on getting back into school, get my classes lined up. I had some lessons and private stuff going in more local in the localized area, and I just wasn't into doing high school coaching and committing to not only the players, to the coach. Like, you know, it's a commitment. If I was going to do something, I want to be fully committed and give everything I had. And there were early on, I just wasn't there. I knew I wasn't going to be able to give those kids what they would need from a coach at that particular time. And the more and more kind of it went through, and we were going back and forth, and time passed. And it's like the further along it went, the more I was ready, and I was ready to get back to a little bit more. And I was intrigued as it went on, and it was a really cool experience. I was able to implement some of the stuff I was studying at that level, and it's kind of all lined up at the right time. But initially, it wasn't right. Well, I knew I wasn't able to give it what it deserved, and I said no up front.
I think that book, that moment, and you getting your master's all kind of come together in your next opportunity. So I want to talk specifically about you as a player and what you learned on and off the field. Off the field could be about yourself, self-discovery, that helped you in the position that you're in right now with the Los Angeles Dodgers.
That's a great question. It really is, and it's something that we lose sight of, I think, in the moment as players. We're so engulfed with performing and results and moving and getting to the next level. And I think the things that I learned more were after. It's what happens all the time, right? We learn this after, which is why I'm so passionate, and so are you, about teaching, about hoping to get these ideas to these players and people ahead of time to mitigate some of the things that we learn after. But it really is about process, and you really learn if you get so enwrapped with what's next and the next level and to next performance and riding that emotional roller coaster. It just makes it so much harder. That was one of them. The other thing is the value of relationships and the value of being part of a team and playing for somebody else, you know, and their careers matter on you sometimes too, and just how important relationships and being a good teammate is and what that means, because that's what carries you on life, right? Like, no matter what you do, you're going to be part of a team, and you're going to be relying on other people at certain points in time. You're also going to have to carry your own weight in particular instances. So those types of things. And then as a minor league player, like, man, you gotta navigate no money and traveling in these crazy environments and hotel rooms and people from different nationalities and different countries and all this unique cultural experience, right? It teaches you a lot. Like your viewpoints may be different to somebody else, and their viewpoints and their beliefs. Like if you have an open mind on certain things, you can learn a lot about other people and about yourself and what you really stand for. So there's a lot to be gained from playing experience, from the adversity part to handling failures and getting through it and figuring it out, and also handling success. And sometimes that's harder to do than handling failure, handling success. And the more you have, and the attention you get from it, and then not being complacent, getting sucked back to the middle. So there's a lot to unpack with that type of thing. But those are the main ones as a player and playing that I gain the most from, I think. So
Sure.
So great question, because that could go so many different ways.
It can, and I think each person takes it different ways.
Of course.
So as a coach, as someone who is focused on skill development specifically, you've seen this firsthand with either teammates of yours, players that you coach, or players that you kind of like oversee in the player development process. Don't name names here, but like give us some examples of dealing with success, handling failure, and dealing with failure.
Yeah, and the list goes on and on. I mean, you can open a newspaper or read any sports book, and they'll tell you the stories of people who got wrapped up and they were, had high success, and it went the other way. They went partying. The people they started hanging out with, the crowd they started running with, they just got comfortable in that environment, and then it imploded on them, right? Or the ones that did succeed, and they were able to keep focused on the process and understood why they were performing at a high level or having quote unquote success. They stayed with that process that got them there, and then they get wrapped up with what was happening. They stuck with what kept them grounded, and those guys continue to have success no matter what. The ones that struggled, the ones that rode the roller coasters, and I was one of them at times. I'd ride the highs, and then I would hope not to struggle. And then you struggle, and you go through over 10, 15, even longer at the professional level because you play every night. Next thing you know, you're over 30. And if your mindset and your goals and your values aren't in line, you stay in that place a lot longer. You just do. And the guys who are able to navigate those and just get themselves out of that faster and put things in perspective quicker, those gaps were a lot smaller. And that's really the goal as an athlete, right? Is I usually say the goal of an athlete is to suck less more often. That's all it really is. That's who the best are. They're just not as bad as often. And most sports, especially baseball, the success rate and quote unquote in terms of stats is not very good. You fail 7 times, you're pretty good, and that's a lot of getting out. So the ones who are able to get out less or suck less more often are the ones who have sustained careers. And that was kind of the guys who were able to do that more consistently, have longer careers. Now, they do that to the big leagues potentially, or just have a longer minor league career. Yeah. But you find that mindset and what helps you get through those times is directly related to off the field as well. In your next job, as a parent, as a husband or a wife. It affects how you, it's a correlation to everywhere in life, not just a field of some sort. So understanding how you have success is more important than having success or failures. Why are you failing? I don't think we spend enough time processing successes and failures. We just process how it feels to win or lose and not really why and when certain things happen. So once you start identifying with the whys and wins of each circumstance, it just becomes second nature no matter what area of life you're discussing.
Yeah, so a lot of that is processing what's going on, right? Being in the moment, but also understanding what's happening to you, how you feel, all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about these 2 points here, which is the player has to kind of understand what their process is, where they are in their process, whether it's failure or success. But for the coach in your position, how do you sit down with a player, especially maybe a newly acquired player, newly drafted or signed player, and understand their process so you can coach them better?
Yeah, so it begins with questioning. I mean, some of the best coaches ask the best questions. The trap of coaching, especially when you're new at coaching, is to impart all your knowledge because you're a coach. You're supposed to teach, and you're supposed to impact, and you're supposed to make them better. So the only way you do that is by telling what you know. But really, the master coaches are the ones who ask the questions. What are you doing? What are you trying to do? What do you want to do? What is your process? And then helping them answer those questions if they can. Many players don't know what their process is. What's your process? You're like, well, I don't know. It's okay. And then you ask, well, why do you think a process would be important? What would a good process look like if you were to have one? And you start walking through the questioning the route, and now all of a sudden they become part of the process. And then the byproduct of them being part of the process is them maximizing themselves individually. They own it. And as soon as your coach can have their player or student, whoever it is, own what they're trying to do, the faster you get to where you're trying to go. The faster or quicker you can maximize your current abilities or skills, right? Because they're a part of it. Once it becomes yours, you're just more apt to do it more often as opposed to it being somebody else's ideas or their philosophies or their thing. It's not yours. So the master coach is really the one, or the good coaches are the ones who are able to, ego aside, it's about you. So if it's about you, I need to know about you and asking them straight up. And that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, especially I check myself often, making sure I'm asking enough questions and listening more than I'm talking, especially early on. Because when I do want to make a point, or if it's just not going the right way, I'm able to interject a little bit more effectively than if I were out of the gate just say everything I know, and all of a sudden you just become a voice. And when you really want to hit something, it lands on deaf ears because they're sick of hearing you talk. So, I mean, questioning is the number one thing, and then the line of questioning you use, answering their answer with another question. And not fall into the trap of giving answers. Answer their question with a question. That's how you find out. And it is hard, especially early on, especially players who've never been pushed to think that way. So now you're killing two birds with one stone. You're starting to formulate a problem solving and a process within them, and you're also answering the question of what a process is. So you're actually doing two things at one time by answering questions with questions.
Sure, I think that was great, and you kind of nailed it with that asking the process thing, because they don't know. It becomes second nature. It becomes the way they view things, their perspective, and how they break things down that works for them. But it's also what they're used to. So I have two other words that I want to throw at you that I know you use these words and you kind of embody these words. I can tell just from talking to you that it's something that not only do you say, but you also practice, which are passion and motivation. Right? You are passionate about what you do. You're a passionate guy, and you're motivated, right? But now those are two words, especially for this generation coming up, that I think they might, I don't want to say awkwardly use, or maybe they don't use it with a support system in place with, they might say, I'm passionate about this. But you want to see, how do you show that you're passionate about that? What actions are you taking that kind of simplify the passionate side and then show that you're also motivated? So for you, I want to talk about how you understand a player's passion, whether it's there or not. How do you get the best out of them? And then how do you understand what they're motivated by, and how do you get the best out of them in that regard?
Yeah, passion's a big one, right? I think there's a quote that I've had for a long time on my Twitter picture, whatever it is. It's, people will say a lot, so I watch what they do. And you'll find out right away what people are passionate about by what they do. You don't need to tell me you're passionate about playing, and you want to get to big leagues. Right? There's a difference between wanting and committing. There's a difference between liking and loving. And by what you do, your day-to-day behaviors will show me if you're passionate about what you're trying to do or not. If you tell me you're all in and you want to get some early work done, but then you don't show up or you're late, or you call me and text me you have a headache or you're tired, well, then you probably didn't get to bed last night. You're really not committed to this thing. Are you really passionate? Like, what are you really passionate about? And I will ask those questions. Again, I'm not one, I really don't care what you're passionate about. My job is to make sure in our industry and in baseball that I create an environment for you to get better and to fulfill your personal, skill sets and your abilities at the highest possible level. That is my job, to create that environment. Now, after that, it's up to you. If you're passionate about something, you will. My little daughter there, get a little zoom, but you'll do it, right? So that's how I know someone's passionate. You don't have to tell me, you'll show me, and I'll create the environment to make sure you're able to do that. So that's fine. And the motivations, we're all motivated by different things. There's a lot of research articles on, is intrinsic better than extrinsic, and which one should you be? Like, who am I to tell you what you should be motivated by? It's not up to me. If you're motivated by money because you want to take care of your family, and go ahead. But there are articles and books that say that you shouldn't be. Well, I don't agree with that. If you want to do that, and that's what motivates you to keep your stuff in line, to get your workouts in, to be a good teammate, all these things that you're supposed to do because you want the money, go ahead. If you're motivated by the fact that you just love playing, or you're motivated to see how good you personally can be, great. To me, there's no difference. Like, I don't care what it is, but there's got to be an it, right? There's got to be something that drives you to do the extra thing, to say no to the right things, to say yes to the right things, and go about the process the right way. There needs to be something that's grounding you. What that is and what it looks like, I really don't care, and I'm not one to judge you on what that is. I remember there's a cool story. Jose Vizcaíno, who played in the big leagues for 20 years, utility player, but played a long time, won a championship. I mean, one of the most well-liked guys in baseball, tells a story about him being 8 years old, and it was his birthday. He lived in the Dominican Republic, and he told his mom, "Mommy, I want a fire truck. I want a toy fire truck for my birthday." And his mom, was welled up with tears and said, "Jose, I don't have the money for that. I can't afford that." And he tells us, I'm crying. Now I start crying. My mom's crying. I'm crying. I want a fire truck. We can't afford it. And I told her right then and there, "Mommy, I'm going to go play for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I'm going to make a lot of money so I can buy any toy I want." And that was like his motivation the rest of his career. Like, obviously the red fire truck no longer became the goal or the toy. The concept was, I want to make sure that this is never a conversation again. You're going to get what you need and want. I'm going to make plenty of money. And that was his driving force. Leaving the country at 16 or 17 years old, didn't know English coming to the United States, how hard he had to work to get to where he got to and stay. Comes back to the red fire truck. Who am I to say that was the wrong motivation? Because he's the most amazing person I've ever met. There are books and research that say that's the wrong motivation. It's external, and it shouldn't be. You should be doing it because you love it. Like, come on. So motivation, man, that's a good question, because I don't know, and personally, I don't care. As long as I do know, I do like to know what it is, so that I can use that potentially to, hey, man, how are you supposed to make $20 million if you can't even show up to a workout? I will use it, but I'm not going to judge you by what it is. I thought you told me you want this because you love it. Well, if you really love something, you're committed, here's what that would look like, in my opinion. Now, again, that goes back to you. Like, it's on you, man. Like, it's up to you. That's just my interpretation of it. So you start, you start planting these seeds. You start using it for the right reason. And again, it always goes back to, that's why asking questions is so important, because it's not what I said. I'm just going off of what you told me, and my job, again, is to make sure I create the environment to get what you are trying to do. That's the key to this thing.
Sure. So that's a great story, by the way. And, I want to ask you, it's probably a simple answer, but how do you get a story like that out of a player? Because it is part of finding out what their motivation is. Even though you may not care if it's this or that, you still want to know where they come from. And that's blending, in that sense, the childhood to the present, who will tell them what their future could be.
Yeah. So again, it goes back to the line of questioning. So if you were to ask a player what motivates you, they're like, they don't know, because they never really thought about it, right? You only know, you can only express what you think about the most, right? So you go, I want to play in the big leagues. Okay, so for every level of question, you ask another a why. So why do you want to play in the big leagues? Travel. I mean, why? Well, and you see players think, well, the money. Why do you want money? Well, because I want to have a boat. Well, why do you want a boat? You know, you keep going on these questions. Ultimately,
Yep.
at some point, why do you want so much money? Do you not come from money? I mean, all of a sudden, it's like, well, I didn't have anything growing up. Oh, you didn't. What do your mom and dad do? Da, 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 da. So you connect the dots along with them. So you're getting their story along with challenging them with their why and having them understand why. And now they're verbalizing it, and all of a sudden, it becomes here comes the trust, here comes the relationship, here comes everything we talk about coaching, right? All these sling words, got to build trust, got to have a relationship. Well, how do you do that? We ask them about their girlfriend, like, no, that's surface level stuff. So when you're really getting to build a relationship and trust, all you've really done is asking them what drives them, what motivates them, what their passions are, and have multiple levels of why. Why is that important to you? Well, I'm trying to understand you, but also, I'm building this trust with you. Like, why? And if you can't tell me why, how are you going to execute it? How are you going to follow through with it? So again, multiple layers of developing this concept, right? And things to pull from down the road and through the development process. But that would be one way or multiple ways there of how to get to motivations and understanding somebody's why and what drives them. So yeah, unless you're asking, if you ask Bisky what drives you, he'd say that because he lived it, right? But there are players who don't, and it takes some prodding, and that's the art of coaching. Knowing when to ask the right questions and how to ask the right questions. And again, you're asking questions to listen, not to impart your own viewpoint or belief on it.
Right. So process, commitment, those are words that you speak about often. And I think the funny thing about this is you can have a process, but you can also not be committed to it. So we should talk more about commitment here. So what commitment do you see that people, let's just talk about people or athletes, must take into consideration? And how does that fit on and off the field for coaches and players?
Yeah, commitment's a skill. You know, I think commitment's another one of those words. I'm committed. Are you? Then why do you just back out of it 2 weeks later or a year later? You know, I'm committed to this school, but then you went to a different school. Coaches, I got this kid committed, but then you cut a scholarship. You weren't committed. Like, you know you're committed when it happens. You know, one of my best friends used to say that all the time. Hey, Shaun, you know when you're committed to something? You know, like I give him all these, like, really, I'll do anything for it, you know, all the stuff you would say. He's like, no, it happens. You know you're committed to something when it happens. Otherwise, it's not. So when you're committed to something, also, all of a sudden you start seeing there aren't that many decisions to make. There aren't decisions because I'm committed to this. That distraction doesn't even exist. I don't have to worry about that. So you know you're committed to something when all of a sudden distractions and other stuff are no longer options. There's only one or two. And it's usually just one option because this is, am I getting closer or further away from where I'm going? Pretty simple. And you know you're committed to something when those decisions are getting you closer to where you're trying to go. It's really simple. In practice, if you're really committed, those things do. If you get married, you're committed to your husband or wife, you don't put yourself in situations that would affect that.
Right.
It's not that hard. Like, you're committed or you're not. So it's an action, it's a behavior, it's a skill. You practice being committed to everything you do or you say you're committed to. So commitment is a big word, and to me, it's the basis of everything you do in sports, especially process. We have something with Adapt called our C4 process, right? And it's basically designed for processes in the game, and we talk about stick to the process, not result. Well, what's that mean? And part of our C4, one of the C's, is commit. You got to get centered, get yourself centered, get yourself together, and then you got to commit to what you're trying to do. It's not the umpire's call. If you're worried about the umpire's call or the crowd, you're not committed to getting the next pitch or executing this, whatever you're trying to do. You're not. So until you're centered, you commit to what my goal is, my plan, my approach. Nothing else matters. Then you can't compete. How can you compete and do if you're not committed to the simple things? So that's a big one. Commitment is huge, and especially in the realm of process. You can't execute a process consistently if you're not committed to it or any part of your process that makes you go. Whatever your process looks like, or whatever you say to yourself, or whatever that is for you, if you're not committed to every single part of it, that's fine. So when you're committed, really what you're saying is, I'm willing to go down. I'm willing to fail with this process. That's when you know you're committed to it. I'm willing. I know for a fact I'm in, and I'm committed. Let's go. Yeah, it's like you're free falling. You're jumping into the ocean, man, off a big rock, right? Like you just go.
Yeah.
There's not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You jump. Either you're in or you're out. And that's hard for people, especially in this day and age. Like I say, this day and age, like I'm part of the age, right? But any app, any app, Tinders or whatever it is, where you're constantly swiping yes or no, all these options. It's hard to commit because we go to the grocery store, we go to a fast food restaurant, all these different options. Like I don't know, the best place for me to go eat is like In-N-Out because there's only one option. It's a burger. You want a double or not? Like that's it. Easy,
Yeah.
simple, right? But yeah, that's all commitment really is. You just limit the options, and when you're committed, they start to go. That's why I'm so passionate about it. Because and it is. It's a skill, not just a word. And it's one of those words that's so overused, especially in sports. You know.
Yeah. So an interesting part of that, I'm going to give you like a few questions here, is knowing if what you're going to do or what you call maybe a distraction is something that helps you to acquire skill, keeps you on that path. For example, I'm just going to pick something like reading a book, right? Let's say you give a player a book and you're like, I want to read this book. And that guy goes, I hate reading. I don't want to do it. It's going to take time away from me watching film or me taking BP or anything like that. How do you convince that player, really the person, to acquire that skill of A, reading, but B, taking that information so that they can show that they're committed to what their overall process or goal is?
Yeah, so maybe it's, let's use your example. Say I don't like to read, but you give me a book because you know it's powerful, right? You say, here's a book to read. Well, I don't like reading. And then we must not be committed because you want to read. Well, I think if I were to give you a book, and same conversation now, I'll like, okay, how about this? Don't read the whole book. Read the first 2 pages. Then I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow. Would you read about the first 2 pages? And now we'll chunk it. You know, so you're not reading the book. That's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've got this big old book right here. It's huge, right? Like, ah. But if I start chunking, hey, look, I think there's something here. I think you mentioned to me about you like leadership, man. It's probably one of the best leadership books I've ever read. Now, how about we do something together? We'll do it together, and we'll read it page by page. Tomorrow, 2 pages tonight, 3 pages tomorrow, 4 pages the next day, 2 pages the next. You know, we'll play with it. And over the course of time, we'll have finished the book together. I think you just got to frame it in a better way. That's not so overwhelming. So we talk about minor league players. A newly signed player, we start talking about the big leagues. That's so far away sometimes. Sometimes we get so far away, they can't even relate to it. Like, I just got done playing in high school, and you're talking about playing in front of 50,000 people for the World Series against Max Scherzer? Like, whoa, hold on. Let's not go there yet. You're not ready for that yet. So we've got to be mindful of what we give somebody in terms of developing. We got to make sure they're ready for that level of it. Just like you're developing a skill, we're not going to go to some sort of machine or some sort of very challenging type drill or environment if you're not ready for that yet. It's like a fire hose down your throat when all you need is a drink of water right now. We don't need to go that fast or that far yet. Doesn't mean you're not committed. You're just not ready. So that's how I approach all these things. Are you, from my understanding where we're at, are you ready for this next step? Now, if you can't even take the baby step towards it, then there it comes the argument. Are you that committed that you can't even do 1 page? Like, how about I read it to you? Like, I'll give you some note cards on it. Like, I don't know. I would just, you got to make sure though, before you, again, placing judgments or projecting what you think should be on somebody else is the major pitfall. Just because you don't want to read or just because you don't want to do a particular drill that I say doesn't mean you're not in. It just means you're not in on that particular concept of how you're trying to get it across. Now that's my job as a coach to figure out why. What am I doing wrong that you're not motivated to do what I thought you're supposed to be motivated by? So again, coaching, teaching, sometimes we like to say, well, they're not coachable. They're not teachable. Wait a second. Your job as a coach or teacher or whatever it may be is to create the environments that they do that. So it's always got to be finger pointing back at you. What am I doing good or not right? given the circumstance that we're talking about right now. That's one of the benefits and drawbacks of the book Mindset, Growth and Fixed. It's become, if you don't agree with me, then you have a fixed mindset.
Right.
Which is actually the mixed, that is the fixed mindset, right? And that's where this whole growth fixed thing has been funny to me to watch coaches do and use these terms. If you don't agree or you're not doing what I say, then you're fixed. Have an open mind. Well, hang on, coach. How about you have an open mind and go a different direction here with what you're trying to do? And that's what's fascinating to me. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I'm smiling because me and my friends joke about that exactly through text. But I think the book example is a really good one. And you talk about a few things. One is habit forming, which is, James Clear, Atomic Habits. They talk about doing things in truncated fashion that it becomes a habit, you become wanting to do it. But it also goes back to how they learn. Let's say you give someone a book and they're like, I'd rather do an audio book. Well, okay, that's fine. We didn't even talk about that as an option. But at least they're trying to find a way that works for them. Maybe you give someone an article they'd rather watch videos on. That's fine too, as long as the information's coming in. So that kind of ties into what I know is your huge focus with your company with your wife, but then also what you do in your job, which is among your expertise areas is skill acquisition and skill transfer. So talk to me about that, because I would love to know more about acquiring skills on the field and how those skills transfer off.
Yeah, and that's a big question, and it's a really good one. I spent a lot of time looking into it, and that was my job coming in with the Dodgers. Like, hey, Shaun, take practice and take how we develop players and flip it on its head from the tradition, and let's be better. So yeah, I went down these rabbit holes, right, on every block practice, random practice, variable practice, ecological dynamics, constraints-led approach, internal, external cueing, everything, right? And like everything else in our life, and like how this world goes around, it's all based on balance, right? And everyone's looking for what's the way. I've done a lot of podcasts and stuff on this exact same topic. It's like, what should we be doing? Well, in my opinion, and from what we've done and how we've developed our players, that's we've seen the work is it just depends on where they are, and it depends on your players, it depends on you as an individual, and it depends what you're trying to do. I think there's got to be a balance of there is a time and a place to rep something out over and over and over and over and over again, especially when it's new. I mean, that's been done for years and years and years, and it's worked. Now, there is a time and a place now to move on to more of a challenging type environment, right? Pushing yourself just outside your comfort zone. And a lot of research and writings have been done on just getting to that sweet spot, if you will, just beyond your comfort level, but not quite into this unknown, impossible spot, right? Constantly getting just a little bit more. How can we live in that space more often than not? While also making sure we maintain enough confidence. And then how you frame confidence and what that even means, it's a whole other conversation probably, right? But this idea that you can progress and come back and forth, it's a kind of ebb and flow. I think we look at developing a skill as this linear thing, where it's not. It's kind of this bouncing back and forth of these different ideas. That is where we become the best version of ourselves, and we kind of latch onto maybe this track, and it kind of takes us this way. And that person might go on this other track, and it's going to meet somewhere down the road. But we can't just go like this one track, one lane, one road for everybody, and that's kind of the point. Your practice for you learn to play the guitar, and maybe I start challenging you more because you get the basic string faster than I did, and we're going to push you to Mary Had a Little Lamb a little bit faster than me, right? He's progressed a little bit quicker. That's fine. But I think as we talk about skill transfer, how it transfers over, to me the biggest part of the whole thing is not linear, right? And again, off the field, the same. The concept is the same. Doses based on where you're at with what we're trying to accomplish. Whether it's trying to be a leader, whether it's trying to understand commitment or confidence, whatever you're trying to do or teach, understanding that that level of it is the exact same off the field it is on, especially with habit forming. You can't just I'm gonna maybe stop eating smoking. Maybe it's just going to work out. Like, I'm gonna go work out today. I'm gonna do the ultimate workout. Like, whoa. That's going to just detract you from going the next time. Similarly on the field, like if I just try to go to a drill too fast, you're out on me as a coach, and you're out on this whole concept when I just approach it the wrong way. So again, incrementally doing things I think are the most valuable, and you start building habits. The consistency again, and always goes back to commitment. Are you committed to the long-term goal, and how are you going to do that incrementally? You kind of work backwards, right? So having a mission statement, having a mission is so important. Where am I going to go? And I work backwards. But same exact concept of developing a new skill of any kind.
Sure. So I'm going to throw in a phrase that I think you've used a little bit today, but it's also, if you go to your Twitter, it's pinned as the first tweet, which is environmental design. So I think the very interesting part here is that we've been able to look at, there's a need for a process, there's a need to commit to that. And then along the way to those things, you will acquire skills, you can form habits, and kind of make a way for you to develop through there. But all that stuff is important, but it's really the environmental design of where it takes place and resides that is. So one part of that question is, how do you create that environmental design for the player? But then if you're the player, and let's say, we're in a pandemic, which shouldn't happen again, but it could, how do you create that environmental design for yourself off the field to continue to, have a growth mindset, or continue to form positive skills and all that kind of stuff that is part of your commitment to the process?
Man, fantastic question again. The first part, environmental design, we're all byproducts of our environment. It is how it is, and how our environment shapes us, and who we're hanging out with, and what that environment allows us or not allows us to do. And that interaction between my skill sets, my mindset with where I am, has a major impact on the long-term development of anything you're doing. So as a coach, we have to take that into consideration. Number one, what kind of environment am I creating to get the most out of this player? So a couple of things probably should happen. One, they need to feel safe. Psychologically safe. It's not personal. We are the expectation, we're going to push you to get better, but also understanding that you're in a position where you can ask any question you want anytime. It's individualized. This is for you. If I'm in an environment that I know that is designed for me to get better, I am for sure going to be fully invested in it, a lot more than I would be if it's for a group of these other people that I don't even relate to. So how you create an environment as a coach to make sure it's safe, you're pushing them outside their comfort zones to an extent, but also for every level of challenge you're pushing them, there's got to be levels of support. That's one of the old school coaching flaws is push, but don't support. If you don't get to where you're going, you must be weak. Like, no. Then that leads to that's not psychologically safe. Right. So now if you're going to an environment where you're not psychologically safe, you get pushed to an extreme that you're not even comfortable with, and you're not part of the process, chances are I'm just going to be compliant but not committed. There's a difference, right? You can be just because I'm compliant doesn't mean I'm getting better. All it means is I'm doing what you're telling me to do. Doesn't mean I'm in completely, right? So there's a difference between buy-in and investment. I can pay you, I can buy in, but I'm not fully invested. So creating that environment should be the number one thing you do as a coach. Before you coach any player, anything, like, what environment am I creating to make sure I can maximize it? It has nothing to do with what I know, the drills I'm about to do. None of that matters if that player is not flourishing in the environment that I've now created. So that is number one. Yeah, so that's one. So the second part of it, in terms of how I've handled this whole pandemic thing and creating my environment at home and off the field, has been an extreme challenge. So anything we've talked about today usually sounds really easy. It's like, I want to make the point to whoever ends up watching or listening to this, none of this stuff is easy. It's easy to talk about, and what I fear a lot of times while trying to make the point is, just because we're saying it and it sounds easy, you may not be doing half these things, doesn't mean you're wrong, doesn't mean you can't succeed, doesn't mean you're bad. Like, I have really struggled personally during this time. You've taken baseball away from me. I've done that for 40 years of my life. Yeah. It's gone, basically, right? You've thrown me now into my home environment where I have 2 kids, and I'm home. I'm home a lot. But man, a 4-year-old, basically a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. My wife's pregnant with twins, so she's got her thing going. We got these 2 little kids dominating us, or me specifically. I've got these projects going. I'm trying to hang on, like you said, to the players that we have and trying to navigate this uncharted territory, how to develop players. What does that look for 220 players plus 75 staff members? boom, chaos, right? Like, I don't know. So I've had a hard time up until recently creating my environment, like, and understanding what affects what affects me productively or effectively or ineffectively, and the adjustments I need to make given the circumstances that we're in right now, you know. And it's hard. So yeah, I think I've learned a lot through this, understanding what to take away, what's important, what's not, given the circumstance, and again, and then creating the environment around it to make sure it supports productivity while also adhering to things that matter. You know, I haven't been home this much throughout this time of year, particularly with
Right.
2 kids. I'm not. It's been crazy, right? So it's hard. I want to make sure people understand that we talk about commitment, we talk about process, we talk about environment creation, we talk about getting to know the individual and, passion. It's hard. It's really hard to get all this stuff together. And again, the stuff we've talked about is stuff I have studied, implemented, and done, and continue to read and study about and write about for the past however many years now. This is not something I listen to one podcast and like, oh, I got it figured out. Never gonna happen, right? And
Right.
we talk about process. Formulating a process is kind of a process of itself, right? But I just want to make sure people understand this is not easy. All this stuff we're talking about, but the more you talk about it, the more you break it down on your own and really reflect on what you listen to, what you read. I can't stress enough writing your own thoughts and your own ideas, how much more valuable that is than taking notes on somebody else's experiences.
Sure.
You talked earlier about how people learn, and we talk a lot in our industry and coaching, and people come and talk like, how do people learn, visually or kinetically? Some people are visual or verbal learners. Like, I kind of always raise my hand like, well, I know how everybody learns, and that's by doing. At some point, you have to do it. You can show me as much as you want. You can tell me I don't care what kind of learner I am. At some point, I have to do it. So all the information that people take in, and I think it's funny, people post the books they're reading and they're posting here are the notes I took on this book. Great. But what are you going to do now to really make the impact you're looking? You want to make an impact. That's why you're reading the books. That's why you're listening to the podcast. All these smart people. But at some point, you have to do it. And that looks differently for everybody. And I can't stress enough how important writing is. And something I've really learned through this whole thing is shutting off my phone. I've taken a break from Twitter. I put that out to the world like I am done with this for a while. And I get up earlier in the morning now, and I just created the environment that shaped it to where I can get the most productive. I get up way earlier to my kids are still sleeping. My wife's doing her thing earlier on too, and I come to my office, I get my coffee, and I read and I write, and I'm not distracted. Period. Before, I would try to fit that in the middle of the day, or my kids would wake up, which would wake me up, and now I'm reacting the whole day, and then I get frustrated. So the awareness part of it, that's a side tangent. I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's hard.
No, I think you painted the picture with the process. It's like, it's good to have a process, but in your case and in everybody's case through this pandemic, our process has changed, shifted, adapted, whatever the word you want to use, several times. We're not going to get too far into your personal life and dad life and all that stuff, but you go from 2 to 4, your process is going to change, whether you like it or not. And I think that's the thing, is like having confidence in being able to create a process once, and then even if you do it on baseball with your, pregame workout or your pregame routine, whatever it is, if you can create a process in everything and know that it's going to change and that you can create a new one, that's a confidence building thing. And the other thing you talked about, which was the learning thing, this goes back to the motivation, right? The motivation portion is you have to be one or the other. And learning has to be visual, or audio. And that's not true, right? Like you said that. It's just, we always have to categorize things because you know why? It sells better. It's packaged like that, and we always go that way. But as we start to wrap up, I just want to see, we've thrown a lot of key words out there, and I think a lot of things that people can piece together. Hopefully this isn't the only podcast they ever listen to where they're like, I got it, I understand. But any, last things you want to add in, any kind of advice for players who are listening to this, coaches who are listening to this, people who are working with athletes in general?
Yeah, great points. And like you said, we've covered a lot of things. And like you said just now, this better not be the only one you listen to and think you've got it figured out, because I don't have it figured out, man. And but yeah, take the time to, as a coach, take the time to write down your personal coaching philosophy. Why are you doing it? And what are you doing to make sure you are the best you possibly can be? And this is not about learning the next drill. It's not learning the best technique and mechanics. Like, that's part of it. Be a master at that. But understanding human behavior, understanding motivation, like understanding the human being is going to make you a lot better coach. So, but why? But why do you want to coach? Why are you coaching as opposed to going and selling whatever to make more money, for sure, right? It's got to be more than making an impact. Okay, what does making an impact mean? What does that look like? So take the time to do that. And again, write down your thoughts, write down your values, write down your goals. Your values and goals line up, and this really understand, because it's going to affect how you interact with players and how you understand them. So for coaches, for sure, take the time to, and players, same thing. Take the time to understand, why do you do what you do? Why in the world are you spending so much time away from your friends or family? Why are you in on this? And if you have this end goal in mind, major league, whatever it may be, Division I scholarship, whatever it is, again, why? And then for every level of question and answer, ask another why. Multiple layers of it. So you're 100, when you go and you're in, you are committed. And it's the last thing you need to worry about people ever questioning about you. And again, how many things can you start eliminating? Because we get better by reducing, not by adding. We always think we got to add more, do this, do more, do more. We get better by taking stuff away, not by adding things. And the less we have, the less clutter we have, and the more clear-minded, and here we go. And like you said, once you formulate a process, it may change, but you have an answer to things, the circumstances and things, right? So it's something we can control. That's what process reduces and eliminates luck. It just does, because you're not focused on the outcome anymore. You're just like, my process. This happened, so what? Here's my process to get through it. Done. Mm-hmm. So it reduces all the other things. You have something that you can control and go to, and that's what it's all about, right? So those are off the cuff, a couple of the things there that I think are valuable. And again, all this stuff is hard, and we make it sound really easy, and sometimes it sucks, and it does, man. So embrace it, and then the goal is just navigate it all and suck less. That's all. You're not trying not to suck. That's impossible. Just how can we shorten those gaps of being down and depressed and in the dumps about it? How fast can we rebound and answer back and get back on the saddle and get going again? Because the ones who are able to answer back are the ones that gain ground. While you're sitting around licking your wounds, man, they're bandaged up and going. And that's the goal. How fast can you answer back? That's it. That's awesome. It will succeed.
Shaun, thank you very much for being on Athlete Evolve. Really appreciate it. I think there's a lot that we can learn, and we'll definitely revisit some of those main points and those key words. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Go get them and attack your dreams, man. Anything's possible. We know that. Go get them.